I want to answer two questions for you here. Firstly, does joining NATO make Finland safer? And second, what is the long-term outlook in the world of the opposition? So let's start with the first question, right? So side government claims that NATO membership makes Finland safer from future Russian aggression. The problem is that they do not prove that Russia poses a significant enough threat to Finnish security currently. We think that incursions into Finnish airspace is not an indication that Russia intends to invade or to pursue even further aggressive action on Finland, especially given that invasions are quite costly, that Russia can't really spare the resources right now, see all the sanctions we've placed against it, and Russia has no key strategic interest in holding Finnish territory or causing Finnish instability, right? At least currently without NATO membership. This changes with NATO membership. More on this in a moment. But the second problem here is that they do not prove that NATO membership actually makes Finland safer, other than by repeating the line that Russia has never, well, opening government repeats the line that Russia has never attacked a NATO member, and then closing government says that, oh, we can invoke Article 5, guys, it's going to be great, right? This is an issue for opening government in particular. I'll deal with the Article 5 stuff in a moment, because there's no analysis of why it is the case that Russia has never attacked a NATO member. We claim that if Finland joins NATO, it is very likely that this will be the first time that Russia takes serious aggressive action against a NATO member state. And you know, I mean, there really is a first time for everything, guys, right? So the first reason here is that we think that this will be extremely threatening to Russia. There's an extent to which the proposition recognizes this, because, you know, being threatening to Russia is crucial to their arguments, no thank you. But we think that Jordan explains the special context that makes Finnish membership in particular especially threatening, right? Which makes Russian retribution especially likely. The first claim here is about geography. There's that Finland is extremely close to St. Petersburg, which doubles the threat from Estonia, which is already in NATO and is currently driving distance from St. Petersburg. But more than that, right, we think that NATO, if Finland joins, no thank you, NATO now controls both sides of the channel between Finland in the north and Estonia in the south. This is crucial because this is Russia's only warm water port, and it is the port where the Baltic Fleet is stationed. That means that this is the linchpin of Russian naval power, because when the rest of its ports freeze over in the winter, it's this port in St. Petersburg that they can launch warships from, right? When you take away Russia's ability to launch its warships in the case of responding to some sort of aggression, we think that Russia is going to very likely respond extremely negatively to that, and no way, in any of the ways that either government team would like to talk about, right? But it's more than just geography. Jordan brings you the historical context about how Finland was neutral in the Cold War, and this overturning of this neutrality will cause both Putin and the Russian population to panic. This demands retribution, and this means that Russia will really want to act in this instance, right? And the government teams might say, oh, no. Russia will want to do something, but it can't. They've never attacked a NATO member state before, or, you know, they can invoke Article 5. Am I right?
Okay, so this debate is not only about Finland, it is about weakening Russia, protecting the Baltics and other vulnerable states. Russia's economy relies on having a border country so that they can access Europe, do things like build an oil pipeline. When they lose that border, they get weaker, and our actions are more effective.
Look, I don't think Russia gets weaker when it can cause instability inside Finland, either through direct military action because of the deficiencies in Article 5, or even, you know, indirect action that Jordan talks about later. Moreover, we think that we're willing to pay the price of in the short term, possibly not undermining Russia as significantly as we could, because one, it keeps Finland safer, no thank you, for all the reasons I've talked about, for the reasons I'm about to talk about, but also secondly, because in the long term, it's going to happen to Russia anyway. See the second question I'm talking about later, no thank you, right? So why may Russia actually take direct aggressive action against Finland this time? Firstly, we would point out that most NATO members don't even satisfy their current obligations to the NATO treaty, right? Most of them aren't spending the 2% of the GDP on their military. Only the US and the UK do. Jordan lied when he said for Germany and France did, but Germany and France actually don't. So the second problem here is that NATO members, not only are they not meeting their obligations to the NATO treaty, right? Germany, France, and the UK are all cutting their military budgets even further. So they're moving further away from meeting their obligations to the NATO treaty. This means there's enough uncertainty over whether other countries will meet their obligations when Article 5 is invoked, right? So if we believe that NATO members currently aren't fulfilling their obligations, we think it's especially likely that NATO members won't fulfill their obligations under the Article 5, right? And even if we don't believe that, right, what's important here is that Putin believes that. And we think that Putin is extremely likely to think that, which means it's extremely likely that he will take direct military action, right? But let's say you don't buy that, right? Let's ask, when can you invoke Article 5? You can invoke Article 5 when Russian armed forces march into Finland. But as government concedes, that's not all that Russia can do. Russia can fund xenophobic parties to destabilize Finnish politics. They can deploy little green men, which they deny affiliation to, who don't have to be Finns. They can be, you know, they can be Russians. No, thank you, right, etc. Right, which means that Russia can and do things that will harm the Finnish population and will make people less safe and will make people feel less safe. And NATO does nothing to stop this, right? Because you cannot invoke Article 5 in response to little green men, right? You can only invoke Article 5 in response to direct aggressive military action by the armed forces of a specific country, right? You do not make Finnish people safer. Second question, about sanctions, right? About the long-term outlook. We think that sanctions are significantly weakening Russia, the Russian economy, and Russian military might, right? This means that they are a minor threat in the status quo, but they are minor relative to the threat to you make it when Finland joins NATO. As sanctions take hold, admittedly a bit gradually, care of the impediments posited by opening government, right? We think that Russia's threat becomes increasingly, especially muted, right? This is especially likely because Russia is cutting its R&D budget in the military. It might be a threat now, but as its weapons become antiquated in about 10 years or so, it becomes far less of a threat. When you combine that with the fact that, you know, fracking's growing all over the world, right? We're starting to move to alternative energy sources, which means that Russia's oil and gas revenues are falling drastically. We think that Russia will be extremely weak in the long term, and we think that in that long term, we're all safer without this policy. We oppose.